Hi everyone. I had a chance to do something this week that I absolutely love to do. You see, a young graduate student needed to interview someone that she knew about the greatest influences in his life, and she chose to ask me. Or she found out that I tried to pick up my phone and needed to get her assignment done, so she figured, okay. Now, I loved the question, and I told her that I can't guarantee that the two people I was going to talk about were the biggest influences, but I could tell her that they were among the biggest influences in my life. I was talking, of course, about Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky on the one hand, and Dr. David Pelcovitz on the other. You see, both men are genuine experts in the field of mental health. Both are also incredibly, sincerely religious, and they straddle their worldviews and their approaches to mental health through the prism of religion. I'm going to want both of them. I have been for much of my life, and I try to pattern my personal approach through theirs. And so, questioned about their common worldview, I reminded myself of one of Rabbi Twersky's famous stories. He told about a time that he was at a health spa for a certain treatment. The treatment that he paid for was 90 minutes long and began with a 15-minute soak in a whirlpool. Twersky reminisces that he really enjoyed the dip in the whirlpool. He enjoyed and loved the relaxing heat of the water that relaxed his muscles and the bubbles against his skin, that they were really very calming. It felt so good that he got up after about 6 minutes and called for the attendant to tell him, okay, so take me on to the next step. Sir, he was told, you have 9 more minutes here. Please go back in. Twersky did what he was told. He got back into the water and he sat down. And after another 4 or 5 minutes, he got up to get out again. Sir, he was told, a full 15 minutes is required. So Twersky sat back down, and he noted that he was annoyed, and that the last 4 minutes were sheer torture, and that he was frustrated and angry. And so after the experience, Twersky tried to understand what it was that bothered him. And he explained that he learned that, frankly, he was uncomfortable being alone with himself. Now think about that for a second. The noted rabbi, psychiatrist, addiction specialist, Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky, who wrote over 60 books and articles, whose phone rings day and night with all sorts of people who call for all types of different matters, was not comfortable being alone with himself. Why? Rav Elio Meir Bloch notes that the answer can be found in this week's parsha. The parsha begins with the words, Atem Nitzavim. You are standing. What does the word Nitzavim mean? And why do we not use the word that seems more common, Omdim, standing, to describe the people standing as Moshe's transfer of power to Yoshua was going to take place? Rav Elio Meir suggests that the word Nitzav speaks to a stillness and a time for each of us to take stock. Nitzav is the process of finding one's footing in the midst of a storm about us. It's about knowing who you are in the midst of a crisis and knowing and planning exactly where you're going. But here's the kicker. Most of us, like Twersky, are too afraid to be left alone to do it. Like Twersky, we don't like to have the stillness and the time to just engage in introspection. Somehow, we seem to think that if we do take the time, we might not like the company that we're keeping when we're alone. In fact, there was an incredible study that was done a few years ago that noted that over 67% of men and 25% of the women who previously said they would pay not to have certain shocks given to them, shock themselves voluntarily in order not to just sit alone doing nothing for 6 to 15 minutes. Think about that. People who would rather pay money not to get shocked. Over 2/3 of the men and 25% of the women said they went ahead and shocked themselves to do the exact opposite of what they did. The scientists of the study were baffled about how this big brain, filled with facts and memories and stories and creativity, was not able to amuse itself for just a short period of time. However, it doesn't seem that the brain wasn't able to do the work. It seems like the brain just frankly didn't want to. In other words, the thought of being alone with no distraction was too distressing for the people that they would rather distract themselves with pain than introspect. The Piasetzner Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha Hashem Yimkom Damo, notes that the human soul relishes sensation, not only if it's a pleasant feeling, but just for the very experience of stimulation. Sooner sadness or some deep pain rather than the boredom of no stimulation. People will watch distressing scenes and listen to heart-wrenching stories just to get stimulation. And that is human nature. So he who is clever will fulfill this need with passionate prayer and Torah learning. But the soul whose divine service is without emotion will have to find stimulation elsewhere. It will either be driven to cheap and even forbidden sensation, or it will become emotionally ill from the lack of stimulation. Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky noted that this is why so many of us find contemplative times difficult. As we are humans, we crave stimulation. And we note that we have a hard time davening because it's too long, or because it's too dry, and we can't connect. We're impatient to wait for a minyan to finish Shmona Esrei and absolutely suffer through a Chazaras Hashatz because there's nothing for us to do. We can't last through a Haftorah, and we need to take a break because the words of the Navi are unrelatable. Our kids have a hard time getting through a Shabbos meal without leaving the table because they find the meal boring. We all need the break. I'm not chastising anybody. I'm just noting the difficulty. And we get the challenge. I want you to know, I get it. After all, especially when the rest of our lives are filled with fast-moving news and stimulation and multitasking, finding that time to slow down and take stock of where I am, frankly, it's torturous. Which is why my other great influence, Dr. David Pelkovitz, always reminds us of the famous tefillah of Rabbeinu Bachaya. Harachamon hu yatzilenu mipizur hanefesh. May the merciful one save us from having our souls scattered. Listening to him remind us of Rabbeinu Bachaya again and again and again. I recall one time that he quoted Rabbeinu Bachaya and he added that if you think you are everywhere, then you are probably nowhere. And he went on to explain that when we are multitasking with so many different areas of our lives at one time, then we're probably not connecting to the most important place in our lives, the one that we're standing in right here, right now. Pelkovitz added that the empathy and deep contemplative thought both begin with a mind that's free from distraction. It's been proven in the psychological studies. Connection to our spouses, to our families, to Hashem, and yes, even to ourselves, begins with being there, not with necessarily what we do. You know, when the Eish Kodesh, the Piasetzner Rav, turned 40, he added, "My heart pounds from my impending 40th birthday. My entire body shakes from my oncoming declining years. And still, I will try to muster all my strength to commit myself and my life to Hashem. Perhaps something will remain. But to what shall I commit myself? To learn more? I think that as far as possible, I don't waste any time. To abstain from physical pleasures?" asked the Rebbe. "If it were my own desires are not fooling me, thank God I'm not so attached to the physical desires. So what am I missing? Simply to be a Jew. I see myself as a self-portrait that shows all colors and features real to life. But just one thing is missing: the soul." Ironically, in the hustle and bustle of the COVID-19 crisis, this idea might be the one thing we may be ready to tackle now more than in any other year. We've spent hours alone this year, away from work, away from multitasking, spending more time with close loved ones, and provided with more time to daven and think about Hashem and our relationship with Him. Perhaps this is the year that we introduce an increased level of kavanah into not only our tefillah, but into our lives. And what type of kavanah? Namely, the awareness of who we are, and just frankly, where we are nitzavim. And so, as you stand in your place during slichos, which begin this Saturday night, or in your yomim noraim prayers, as you catch your mind ready to disappear and wander, try to shock yourselves back into the present. Check out the words. Look at the translations to them as they're being recited together with the chazan. Or simply just stand and remind yourself of the presence of standing or sitting in front of Hashem, with the awareness that no matter where your mind goes, lo irara ki ato imadi, we have nothing to fear, since that same Hashem is with us all the time, and therefore we're never alone. Folks, my wife, my family, and I hope and daven for you and your loved ones to have an honest to goodness, ksiva v'chasima tova, a happy and a healthy, a safe and a prosperous year, a year that's filled with spiritual and material success and nachas, only and always. L'shana tova tikasevu v'seichasemu, la'alta l'chaim aruchim tovim u'l'shalom. Shabbat shalom to all.